Welcome to the 37th episode of Rising Tide, the Ocean Podcast. This is David Helvarg, and I'm with my co-host, Vicki Nichols-Goldstein.
Hello, everyone, and welcome, Louie.
Today, it's our pleasure to talk with Louie Psihoyos. Born far from the ocean in Iowa, Louie's been an award-winning photographer for National Geographic. He's the founder of the Ocean Preservation Society, an Academy Award-winning director of the Cove, and director of other outstanding films, including Racing Extinction, The Game Changers, and Mission Joy. So let's start with the obvious, Louie. How'd you get from Iowa to the ocean?
Jacques Cousteau, watching Jacques Cousteau specials when I was a kid. I always wanted to be an oceanographer. And really, when I started working at National Geographic, I was the first guy they hired in about 11 years. But one of the first things I did was, they would assign photographers to look through other photographers' work to see if there's, back then if the film was getting scratched or if things were getting exposed properly. And the first photographers whose work I looked through was David Doubilet, who is one of the best photographers in the world. And it put me in my place really quickly because I realized that I would never be as good as he would be. And it was, it took me about 20 years, I think, before I had the courage to shoot underwater, and with the idea of trying to, listen, I'm never trying to like beat somebody, there's just no way you can touch other people's work, but it gave me the confidence, I think, to do my own work, once I got into a certain level. But it was a journey to get from being a still photographer to a filmmaker.
Right. Well, before we get there, you say, I started working at National Geographic. That's a line that a lot of people would probably like to be able to use. How'd you end up looking at David Doubilet's underwater classic photography and being inspired and being in a position?
Well, I wanted to work for National Geographic since I was a kid, since I was about 6 years old, and watching, my mother getting her hair done. I'd be, looking at the geographics was, mesmerizing. That's true. And every photographer every kid of a certain age wanted to either work for National Geographic or be an astronaut. And you actually had better odds of becoming an astronaut than a National Geographic photographer, because like they hadn't hired one, like I said, for 11 years at the point that I got an internship. But every year back then, they took 3 internships, 2 by portfolio, where you submit your work, and 1 by winning a contest called College Photographer of the Year. When I was a junior, I applied by portfolio, and I got a really nice handwritten letter back from the director of photography, Bob Gilka, who said, basically, kid, internships are for people whose work isn't good enough to be in publication yet. Yours is good enough. Good luck. And I was like, oh, I was so crestfallen.
You're overqualified.
Yeah, I was overqualified for a kid. And so I realized if I was going to have a chance of working there, I'd have to win this contest. And the next year, I'm in the process of moving right now, and I just saw some evidence of, I won the contest, but I also won first place in 6 of the categories. So it's like it's a worldwide contest. And I had the chops back then. I loved taking pictures. I still do.
What were your winning images of?
Oh boy. I remember there's one called, I called it Heated Pool. And it's it's kind of relevant now. I was working down at the Los Angeles, San Diego division of the LA Times. And it was a family sitting by a pool, watching a fire come towards them with, big towering flames. So I called it Heated Pool. Another one was of migrant workers getting arrested, just rows and rows of them in a flatbed truck. They were trying to sneak over, the migrant workers trying to sneak over from Mexico to America. There was, some in portrait personality. There's several categories, but I won quite a few of them. But, that only got me a summer job. And then one of the people that were working at Geographic, it was a layout editor that was about my age, a couple years older. He said, well, listen, there's 30,000 working photographers in New York. Any one of them are good enough to, shoot for the magazine. What you need to do to separate yourself is think like a writer. You like this, David? And, I came from a photojournalism background, so I was writing and photography. He said, well, you have to think like a writer, come up with your own ideas. And I remember we were at the top floor of National Geographic having lunch, and there was somebody, a cleaning woman, hauling the trash across the floor. And, I said, how about a story on garbage? There's this guy, Fred Ward, that was always doing these, stories on like gold, silver, platinum. He's a gemologist, rubies. And we thought, let's do a story on garbage. And, he said, well, we could do like an archaeologist going through, the garbage like you would like like it was an ancient site. And I said, I just read this article about this guy, Bill Rathje, who was a garbologist, and he studied Mayan archaeology, and he uses the same techniques. And he'd say, well, we could do, the garbage art, art from garbage. Fred always does art from these objects. And I was like, wow, I just read about this guy up in Mendocino who does, garbage from art. In fact, anyway, that became the cover of National Geographic. But anyway, I proposed the story for National Geographic. They liked it. And then, so they hired me. I took Bill's idea and my own sort of idea of how do you reframe a dark subject. Remember, back then, in America, there was only one mandatory, this is the key word, mandatory recycling program in all of America. There was a recycling program, but there was only one that said you had to recycle everything. So the story I proposed was called Urban Ore. The idea that it's, ore being that it's valuable and we're throwing it away. And, back then, National Geographic, I think, it was at near the peak of their subscriptions. It was I think the second largest subscription magazine in the world, and about 11 million people bought it. 4 people saw each magazine, so about 15% of America saw that story. And it started, there was a lot going on at that during that time frame, but it really started a water cooler conversation in America about recycling. Because this is a lot of people saw it, a lot of the movers and shakers saw it. There was a very high demographic of people that were political. Every copy of the magazine went to everybody in Congress, and it started a conversation. And I could see that, that was exciting to me, because I come from this group of photographers that it was called the concerned photographer. So like I said, I wasn't interested in like just shooting pretty pictures. I was interested in how do you change a person's mind with photography. That was always my mindset.
So I remember the garbage issue of National Geographic, but never associated it with you. So
that's funny.
How did you evolve from landfills to dolphin slaughter?
Yeah, you'll never be able to look at the trash again without thinking of me. Well, actually, I was doing another story for Geographic on the information revolution. This was back about 1993. This is the internet was just starting. And for those people that don't remember that, the internet really got started in America with Mark Andreessen and Jim Clark. They had invented the first way that you could get on the internet in America was by something called Netscape. And, that this went through the roof. So Geographic hired me to do a story on the information revolution. And Jim Clark was at the center of it. He was like the Steve Jobs of our generation. And I tried to get a hold of him, and he was too busy. He was busy, trying to make a business that would change the world. And then later on, I worked for Geographic for about 20 years, and about the next work I had after that was shooting a lot of covers for Fortune magazine. And one of the assignments was to photograph Jim Clark. He had just built the world's largest, or a boat with the world's tallest mast called Hyperion, and it was completely controlled by computers. Michael Lewis did a book on it called The New Thing. And they said, well, go over to Amsterdam and photograph Jim with his boat. They're going to be putting the mast in. And I'm scared of heights. My dad died from a fall when I was 8 years old. But I was there the day they put the stick in the mast in this, and it was 200 feet tall, just about. And I went up to the top of the mast and slid down, and I photographed Jim standing on the top spreader. It was raining, so it had a yellow slick around. He's smoking a Cohiba, and you could see the boat down below him. It was a beautiful shot. It was made the cover, and we started talking. We went out to dinner that night, and he says, basically, I'd love to do a book on my boat. And I said, well, that's crazy. That's super expensive. And it wouldn't make any sense because it's mostly done already. And we found out that we both love to dive. And I don't know, about 2 or 3 months later, he gave me a call and he said, I really want to do a book on my boat. And I said, well, I told you it was stupid expensive. And he said, well, I said, what's changed? He said, well, I just became a billionaire. This Netscape stock went through the roof. And he said, Louie, would you teach me how to be a good photographer? And I said, Jim, I'll teach you how to be a great one if you teach me how to be a billionaire. And so he would, literally pick me up on his Gulfstream, over at Jeffco Airport, just, south of Boulder. And we go around the world and we take pictures, mostly underwater. And he was really dismayed with the quality of the cameras that were underwater back then. They were all 35 millimeter, and the digital ones were horrible, and even the ones that were filmed had color aberrations, all sorts of problems with them. And he said, why doesn't somebody build a really great underwater camera? Because he could see it then. He saw we're losing the coral reefs. This is over 20 years ago. He said, we're losing the coral reefs. We should document them before they disappear, because the next generation, they're not going to have any idea of the ecosystem that we lost. And I said, well, Jim, they're just too expensive. There's, to get a medium format camera and put it into housing and design all the housing for it, just too crazy expensive. He built one. He built two of the best underwater cameras ever made by an order of magnitude. And that's what we used. We'd go around the world photographing coral reefs, basically dive with, a dozen lights, multiple divers. We'd put light stands underwater, tripods, and we'd light these coral reefs, the best preserved coral reefs, like a jewel box, like you would, if you were in a studio. We dive with the rebreathers, so we could be down 2.5 hours or 3 hours without any kind of decompression obligations, or very little. And we made these gorgeous portraits of reefs. But every time we would go back to a reef or the ocean, we could see this degradation go on. And I think it was like the third time we were in the Galapagos, we came up and there was fishermen illegally fishing in a marine sanctuary. And he said, somebody should do something about this. I said, Jim, how about you and I? Let's do something about it. He said, what do you mean? I said, we'll use your money and my eye, and we'll make films.
So is that how the Cove came about?
Yeah, we actually started Racing Extinction, the second film. Before that was our first thing. I'll do a film, about the degradation of the oceans, and we'll do one on the extinction of the oceans. But then I was going to marine mammal conferences, and then at one of the conferences, I heard about Rick O'Barry. And Rick O'Barry was the guy that captured and trained the 5 female dolphins that collectively played the part of Flipper for the popular, television series back in the 1960s. And at the last minute, they wouldn't let him talk because and I found out why. He was going to talk about the dolphin slaughter in Taiji. And I just couldn't imagine that in this day and age, people were killing dolphins for human consumption. And, Rick, when I talked to Rick, he said, well, I'm actually going next week. Would you like to come? And I said, sure. Well, I tell you what, I'll catch up with you though. And what I didn't tell him is I took a 3-day crash course on how to make a film. And then we went there, and it's a little bit longer drawn out process than that. But yeah, I mean, I didn't have any business. I mean, I had the desire to become a filmmaker, but I just didn't have the chops. And I remember I was on Jim's boat. He had built a new boat, world's largest private sailboat. And I'm down in the Caribbean and with our families on this boat. And my son starts playing on the beach with another kid, and it happens to be Steven Spielberg's kid. Now, Steven Spielberg had done Jurassic Park on Jim's computer. Remember, that was the first really film that had significant CG and computer graphics that were completely invented. Dinosaurs that looked real. And so Jim invites Steven Spielberg onto the boat, and I get Spielberg alone for a minute. I said, Mr. Spielberg, do you have any advice for a first-time filmmaker? And he goes, yeah, never make a movie involving boats or animals. And that's because of his experience of doing Jaws. But the Cove became the most winning documentary in history by the amount of awards it won. But that was never the goal of it. Wasn't to win awards. The goal was to stop what's going on, sort of in the vein of the concerned photography that I was, that I wanted to do. And At the time we did the Cove, they were killing about 23,000 dolphins and porpoises every year for human consumption in Japan. That was the quota. It was more about 19 or 20,000. And I think the last time I can remember they had statistics for it, I think they killed 1,610. So it's down like over 90% since the film came out. And that's a lot because of the activism, not just of our group, but other groups that are working on it now. There's Japanese people working on trying to stop what's going on there. So dolphin deaths are down considerably because of that film and the activism around it.
Well, and it was very nicely done because it could have been a PETA movie. It could have been look at all the slaughter of the dolphins. And instead it was very much an action movie about how you documented the slaughter. You had some, a beautiful couple of free divers who were planting bugs, and it kind of inspired people towards eco-activism. I don't know if that was the intent, but that certainly was the effect.
Well, the intent was to try to make the first rule of filmmaking is don't be boring. And I remember specifically the time I thought, well, God, if we can make a film, like I realized that the Cove is a very protected place. It was protected by police dogs, electronic sensors, guards, and we invented all these ways to break through the Cove. And I remember having this epiphany when I was standing in the park called Tsunami Park above the Cove. I thought, this is going to be exciting. They wouldn't let us in to do it legally, so we'd have to break the law. And I thought, this could be fun. In a dangerous kind of way. You know what I mean? It in my mind, it took us from like a Nova documentary to something else. And I think, Rolling Stone gave us one of the best compliments. They said, the Cove is like a cross between Born Identity and Flipper.
Game changers. I loved that film. We saw that in Texas. And tell us a little bit about that. But I remember laughing. And when I tell people about that movie, I say, you've got to watch it because it is funny, enjoyable, but it also really has a clear message. So,
our mission changed a little bit. We used to say that we're not trying to say that at OPS.
OPS is the Ocean Protection Society.
Oceanic Preservation Society.
And when was that established?
2006, October. And we said, we're not trying to save the whole world, just 70% of it, because, 70% of the planet is the oceans. It was kind of a, funny way of, well, anyway, but you realize that if you're going to save the oceans, you have to change what's happening on land, because awareness isn't enough. It's not about give the people the information, then they'll do the right thing. I think people need to be, their hand needs to be held a little bit more. And certainly with the respect to if we want to change the world, we have to change what's on our plate, because what we're doing, what's being put on our plate right now is directly affecting the oceans. It's affecting dead zones. It's affecting the Great Barrier Reef from pesticides and fertilizers. About 14.5% of our greenhouse gases comes from the raising of food for animals that we're in turn going to eat. And it's a very inequitable relationship. I think it's something like, I want to say 86% of the land that we use is to raise food for animals that we're going to eat. And it only provides about 16% of the calories, more or less. So like this, the eating of animals is the biggest cause of habitat destruction for endangered species, the biggest cause of freshwater pollution, one of the biggest causes of greenhouse gases, responsible for about 85% of the chronic diseases we have. I mean, you can reverse, depending on the stage of disease that you have, with prostate, diabetes, or heart disease, the biggest killer of us all. You can reverse heart disease with a whole foods, plant-based diet. The body just wants to have the right fuel. It just wants to heal. What's good for you is good for the planet. Because the average person in America eats about 10,000 animals in their lifetime. You can't just think about the animal. Think about all the infrastructure it takes, the fresh water, I think, it's thousands of gallons for like a pound of beef. It's fresh water that you have to that's all the crops that go into feeding that animal. It's 3 to 4 tons more of carbon dioxide per year, 9,000 square feet of area, about 401,000 gallons of water extra. I mean, the downstream effects of a meat eater is bad for the environment. And think of all the pesticides that you have to put on that gets washed down to the rivers and dissolves the reefs. It's a cascade of problems that can be alleviated for yourself and the planet, and then certainly the animals. So there's a wonderful line in our film from Patrick Baboumian, who's one of the world's strongest guys. He's carried more weight further than anybody in human history. And somebody asked him, he said, how can you get as big as an ox, just eating plants? He says, have you ever seen an ox eating meat?
So when you produced The Cove, you were already working on racing extinction.
It's a little bit, it's like the Cove on steroids. We built this, we took a Tesla and made it into a Bond car for the environment. It's the first car in the world to have an electroluminescent paint job out of the front of the car where you normally have the engine. We had a forward-looking infrared camera, a FLIR camera that came out of the front with so we could see greenhouse gases, and then we could project those images from an IMAX projector that came out of the hatch, and we could project it on mountains and skyscrapers, and had disappearing license plate. It was an incredible car.
It was a remarkable car, remarkable movie, and certainly I think really impactful.
When you look at the science of social change, the magic number is 10%. You need 10% of the population to be 100% activated, to believe in the truth. For that, that's the recipe for social change. And so we knew we couldn't get to that number with a documentary, even a great one, but we could with projection events. So what we did is we projected endangered species onto the United Nations, onto the front of the General Assembly building. This is with their permission, by the way. And then on the North Tower, they have this wonderful Vermont marble on the north side. We did that, and we wanted to project I wanted to project endangered species onto the Empire State Building. That to me was like, what I wanted to do the whole time. So we projected endangered species on the Empire State Building, and we had 939 million media views by Thursday. We did this on a Saturday night. It's the top trending story on Facebook and Twitter for 4 days worldwide. And we thought we couldn't get any more. That's over 10% of the pop. Well, those are media impressions. So you could, one person could see it a dozen times through different, it was on the cover of the New York Times. A lot of media picked up and showed it. But we thought we couldn't get any more impactful than that. And then the Pope called. The Pope wanted us to project on the Vatican for right during COP21. Now, remember, Pope Francis is named after St. Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of animals. And so he wanted to remind world leaders while they were at COP that there's more at stake than just.
At the big climate conference.
Right. There's a new one coming up. So we did that for the Pope during Paris's, COP21. And it was incredible. I think there was 225,000 people watching that event live. We had 600 media there, 4.4 billion media impressions just in the English language. And it just went through the roof. And those projections led to laws that protect some of the most endangered species in the world, because of the activism around it. It was really quite phenomenal. Now the UN has asked us to come back and do a projection event on the east side of the building facing Queens. So you have the New York skyline, and we're projecting on the 38-story tall Secretariat building. And that's what I've been doing for the last year.
Louie, what do you want to achieve with this? What is the goal?
The goal is to activate 100 million people to solve climate change. Listen, I've had a great life. You guys have too. Vicki, it's been amazing. But the next generation, we're hosing them. It's like I would feel horrible if I thought I didn't do everything I could do to try to mitigate what's going on. At least use the talents that we have to try to alleviate some of the stresses that future generations are going to feel. And I'm encouraged because the films that we do really affect change at scale.
It's just a delight to talk with you. And we're so happy that you were on our show. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us on Rising Tide Ocean Podcast and for making doing good exciting.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Oil and gas is what plastic is made of. Single-use fossil fuel plastic can't be thrown away because there is no way, and less than 9% of it gets recycled. Instead, the ocean has become a dumping ground for plastic waste that kills millions of seabirds, whales, and turtles, dolphins, and other animals every year. Synthetic plastic is also accumulating in the human body with unknown health impacts. That's why the Sierra Club Marine Team suggests a few simple things you can do. Reduce your personal use of plastic, encourage friends and family to do the same, and support the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, and that will hold the petrochemical industry responsible for what it produces, the Sierra Club Marine Team, because 71% of the environment is salty.
To learn more, check out Sierra Club Marine Team on Facebook.
Rising Tide is a production of Blue Frontier with hosts David Helvarg and Vicki Nichols-Goldstein, and with the support of Natasha Benjamin and Ellie Curlow. Rising Tide's editing services and additional technical support are provided by Studio Cape May of San Diego, California. The theme song is written and performed by Ethan Kenvarg. You can find Rising Tide, the Ocean Podcast, at www.bluefront.org or download it anytime from Apple, Google, or Spotify.
Off in the salty ocean, off where the waves roll free, the sparkling water rises, then crashes to the sea. Out amongst the breakers, you'll have no need to fear. It's true, it's the blue frontier. Off in the salty ocean, off to the blue frontier.
Sparky, come here, buddy. Sparky! There you are. Good boy, Sparky.